Hello and welcome. This is the Zen community of Oregon, making the teachings of the Buddha Dharma accessible to support your practice. New episodes air every week.
So thank you for those who came last week and supported Wednesday night while I was away. There was many of us in this room were at a meditation retreat, Zen style, called Sesshin last week. Actually many of us in this room, which is really encouraging, and a few online, but so I want to continue with talking about the precepts. And so the precepts, what that means is the behavioral suggestions of the Zen masters for us. Right? How do we live out a life as a Dharma practitioner through the eyes of this particular tradition? And as I was contemplating this afternoon, I came up with a theory. I don't know, but it's my theory that to go deep in Zen practice, you need to want to be a loving, mature human. Otherwise, you'll meet hard limits. You have to want that. It has to be already alive in you, or nascent in you, a seed in you. You have to want to be a loving, mature human. So that means that you also have to have some degree of a kind of humility that says, I'm still in the workshop. Me, still being worked on by the universe. Nice to meet you. And sometimes that's hard. Like sometimes we really don't like being reflected to us that we're not finished. Something in us doesn't want to, takes that the wrong way. It depends on who tells us we're not finished and how they say it, how we receive it, but so we have to want to be a loving, mature human being. Otherwise we'll meet hard limits in the practice, actually. And this comes out of my observation where I'm not sure everybody does want that. I think there are some universalists who say everybody wants to be a loving, mature human being. Well, I'm not so sure. The world is definitely not evidence of that. What I mean by a loving, mature human being, it includes outgrowing partial love. It includes outgrowing us versus them. And the world does not demonstrate that as a major interest, or maybe it's pretty difficult to actually do without this kind of technology. So that's why we don't see it. So we have to want to be a loving, mature human being, not just to be peaceful. If we only want to be peaceful, Zen will present a hard limit. If we only want to be wise, there'll be a hard limit. I first came to the monastery to Zen practice as a teenager, and I definitely didn't want to be a loving, mature human being. But I met some. I was like, you exist. What is this person? What's your agenda? What's going on with you? Why are you loving and mature? There was a Zen master who's connected to our lineage in some ways, very well-known, named Koun Yamada. And this person very much emphasized breakthrough to enlightenment, so a certain kind of almost samurai approach to practice. But when asked about Zen, he would say, Zen is the perfection of character. The perfection of character. You are wanting to bring out the best in yourself. Otherwise, just go to a dispensary, I guess. Now, how do we know if we want to be a loving, mature human? Some people are like, yes, I do. Yes, I might not use those words, But yes. And some people might be like, I'm not sure. And that's okay. Well, how would you know? What would you listen to? Would your body tell you? Right? Like, sometimes if I fall short of being that, I actually notice that I get a little bit teary. I get a little sort of sadness that I might not have noticed when I was younger. I might not have noticed what my body was telling me about that action I failed at, right? Where I didn't really show up in a mature way. Or I had started this series saying the critic sometimes says your life is off, and it's really an issue with the critic, and sometimes it's not the critic, it's our conscience. Right? Sometimes our mind tells us we want to be loving and mature. So the particular precept that came to mind to talk about, in some ways I think it's the most important one. I think that many of us have struggles with the precepts, speaking the truth, not stealing, not misusing sexual energy, a very difficult one for lots of people, not intoxicating the mind. But in a lot of ways, in the current stability of our culture, many of us, we really could be okay without stealing. We're not really faced with ethical dilemmas around lying. We might have a habit of it where we could refine ourselves, but it's not like a hard issue because our lives are fairly, I can't generalize, but for many people here I know, your life is fairly easy. Right? You don't have to face, do I lie in order to survive? Or anything like that. So this one, I think, when we have our basic needs met, really is the next order of things. This precept is not withholding material or spiritual aid. A couple traditions in America added the positive or the injunctive, not withholding material or physical, I added physical. So not withholding material, physical, or spiritual aid, but giving freely when needed. That's the positive way to state it, to give those things freely when it's needed. The translations that came from Japan were something like not being stingy with wealth or Dharma assets. Not being stingy. Right? There is a conflict between being a stingy person and a Dharma practitioner. There are many precepts that talk about not being stingy with the Dharma assets specifically, and they're for teachers. Right? For some reason, teachers have always needed the encouragement not to be withholding about what they have available, because they're mostly all still human beings. And they discriminate who's worthy and who's not. Or they're like, I'm tired. And this precept's like, no, try harder. Right? Not being stingy with Dharma assets. That is, you have a treasure. Is there something extra that's keeping you from sharing it? If we think about this as really a Bodhisattva precept, to me it makes more sense. The difference in some of the traditional ways of thinking about spiritual practice, there are those who are primarily concerned about their own liberation. That is, the sphere of concern is basically me. It's basically, I suffer. I have this dilemma of life and death that sometimes is really scary, and I'm going to do something about this with my energies. And that in itself is celebrated, and I celebrate that as a very noble thing. But then there's something called the mind of the Bodhisattva, which is a kind of a visionary mind. It's a mind that imagines, if I not only get peaceful, but if I become profoundly free from the deception of the mind, then I'm going to be free to help others do the same at a different level. You know? Some of the old metaphors are like it's the difference between setting up a tea shop and a Walmart. That's my modernization of it. They didn't have Walmarts, but they probably had very big markets between setting up a big market and a little tea shop. Right? So a Bodhisattva precept means one undertakes this with an appreciation, this one in particular, not withholding material, physical, or spiritual aid, that stinginess and fear-based time and resource hoarding are obstacles to spiritual maturing. Right? It's really tricky. You know, who can look into our lives and tell us we are or we aren't giving enough? Who can really do that? Who really knows the intricacies of our situation, our schedules, our emotional resources, our bank accounts? Who really knows all of that? How do we even know? How do we even know whether we're being stingy or not? Has anyone ever read Pete Singer? There's a philosopher, Pete Singer, who said in our situation, because we have so much, that if we're not giving away something like 60 or 70% of our income to less developed countries, then we're not being generous. Because we actually are not in want. Our thrift stores are overflowing with high quality goods. They can't hardly give them away. Right? I'm not saying that view represents the view of Buddhism, but it's really interesting. It's a challenging view. So we undertake this, though, with an appreciation that it's not so much you should be giving everything away, so much as what is it in me that holds back? And what's the effect of that holding back? Where does it come from? Right? Because as we've been talking about in this little series, these are really important for inquiries. I don't think I mentioned that in some lineages of Rinzai Zen, they take the precepts, but they don't study them until the practitioner is at the point of great maturity, 10 or 15 years into their training, and then they study the precepts as koan, as living inquiry. Okay? So I want to unpack some of my thoughts on this precept. Unless we have tasted and then have some confidence in the fullness of simplicity. The fullness of simplicity means that if you had your basic needs met, beyond that, you know that there is spiritual nourishment that is part and parcel of being alive. Unless we have tasted and have confidence in there being a fullness of simplicity, we will always have some fear of giving. We will always have some fear of losing. There will always be a hook into the logic of hoarding, because I haven't yet proved to myself that I could just be in a hut. I need to be fed. I need to not be sick. Yes. I need to have some friends. Yes. We haven't yet proved that once we have those things, it's not just, oh yeah, there's enough. No, it's enough. It's enough. This is one of the things we learn in Sesshin, and why it's so emphasized in Zen training. In Sesshin, the style of meditation retreat, we put aside all of the things that really prop us up as far as objects of happiness. We put them aside. We are well fed. We are safe. We do have good people. We do have natural beauty. These are necessities for human beings, for wellness. And then we sit and we find my heart is full. We find that to a greater degree or a lesser degree. Then we can give. Otherwise, there's the hook into the logic of hoarding my time, hoarding my resources. I haven't proved to myself that I don't need that much. But on the personal level, to work with this precept is a really difficult question. How much do I need for myself? How much do I share and give my resources, my time? How much? Okay? I feel like I need to be a mouthpiece for how individualistic our culture has become, because I think there's been a deepening of that in the last few years that is really very strong, that sort of just happened to us through the pandemic. Sort of just, and now it's the new normal. The degree of individualism that we just take for granted. You might be surprised, or maybe you won't be surprised because you know how many exceedingly wealthy people have money worries. Exceedingly wealthy, right? 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million in the bank, and not just that they're conservative, they're worried about money. But what if such and such happens? What if? What if? The fear mind, the mind of scarcity, survives even $1 million in the bank, right? And I bet someone in this room is thinking, well, $1 million's not enough because I need XYZ lifestyle when I'm 67. 10 million is not enough for some of these people. I'm not judging wealth. I'm pointing out the mind state is very interesting. Right? And there are some people on this earth that have $500 in the bank and live with great trust in the universe. Live with a sense that it's not dog eat dog. That's not actually how things work. When you're locked into that logic, you see with those eyes and you feel that to be true, but that's not actually how the universe works. One of my good friends was reminding me about Peace Pilgrim. You all know about Peace Pilgrim? This woman who had a deep spiritual core to her, and late in her life she just went walking with nothing but like a toothbrush and some pamphlets, and just trusted that because she embodied a message of peace, she would be taken care of. And she was. Right? And that is actually what the Buddha taught. That's what in a sense, it means to be ordained. What it means to be ordained is I'm no longer going to worry. I'm going to do the experiment of leaning into spiritual practice and see how much the universe provides. And we all can undertake that experiment. I'm going to really seriously do spiritual practice, or playfully do spiritual practice. I would like to be free of the word seriously. I'm going to wholeheartedly play in spiritual practice and see what happens. Another version of poke the universe and see what sound it makes. So an aspect of this precept is to listen for when we can see that giving in physical, material, or spiritual ways would positively disrupt our smallness. I remember when I was first starting to meditate and familiarize myself with these ideas when I was 18 years old. And my grandma would be like, Adam, can you take me grocery shopping? And I was 18, for my first thought was, oh, Friday night, Grandma, but I'm going to smoke a joint and listen to Diggable Planets. I'm sorry. I just don't. I've already got plans. But grandmas have a magic wisdom field, generally. And I was able to kind of burst my bubble of delusion. Right? And in those years of her life, those are some of the last healthy years of her life. And I was able to, I would say it was about a year that I probably did this when we still lived in the same city. I was able to have this really saturated, high-quality time with this person who loved me and supported me more than any other family member. Because for some reason, the wisdom of this practice was breaking through my 18-year-old delusion enough that I would hang out with my grandma once a week. So I had the ability to listen for that. I could feel that I was going to be off by only listening to Blowout Comb. Have you ever listened to Blowout Comb? You should listen to Blowout Comb, and you'll know how difficult my dilemma was. Diggable planets. An aspect of this precept is listening for when giving would free us from future regret. I was talking during this meditation retreat that we had recently that one of the ways we can practice is as a wise investor. And to practice as a wise investor means you're thinking in terms of cause and effect. You're thinking in terms of, I might not want to do this right now, but the effects of doing this right now later are going to be very good. It's super hard for human beings to not be impulsive. It's really hard for us to delay short-term gratification, right? But sometimes we have situations where we do the thing we don't want to do. In this case, we give when we don't feel like it, and then we later see the value of that because we're paying attention to cause and effect. Like sometimes you don't feel like it and you show up for a person in your life in some way. Or you don't feel like it, but you give to yourself and you get a particular kind of education. And you can see that that investment, even though you didn't feel like it, actually really paid dividends later on. An aspect of this precept is that happiness, our own wellness, will sour if we make it into a boundaried territory that we protect and defend. Okay. People installing machine guns and video cameras on their mansions, what do you think their state of mind is? When I was, before I came into the Dharma, I had a car I was really into fixing up. I had a Honda CRX that I was in love with. It was so cool. And thankfully it was stolen off my driveway. I thank those thieves. But I remember being with my dear girlfriend at that time and us hooking up and me being worried about my car in the parking lot. That's what I was worried about. That's what was on my mind. It's hard to make that connection between my dis-ease and this thing I didn't have to have, right? Now, I like beautiful things, okay? So I'm not really a materially simple person, but I have seen that any of our happiness sours. Happiness actually becomes pain when fear makes it into a boundaried territory that we protect and defend. A great Bodhisattva, Shantideva, said, human beings actually misunderstand pleasure, and what they're doing is they're like putting honey on a razor blade and they're licking that razor blade. They think they're getting pleasure, but because they're not paying attention, they're not seeing the pain that comes with the grasping that attends that pleasure. Like licking honey off a razor blade. That's a really good metaphor. He also said, human beings don't want to suffer, but they're in love with its causes. So again, this is why I'm trying to say this precept isn't just about like, hey, you, stop being stingy. It's about seeing how, in any way we are stingy, actually there is some stress that's because of that, or that is causing us stress. It's not actually working anyway. It's not actually producing happiness. Our wellness sours when we make it into a boundaried territory we protect and defend. Occasionally you meet someone who's deep into energy work, right? And they're like, I gotta protect my chi. Or someone who's like kind of new agey spiritual and they're like, I need to protect my aura from those negative people. Can we not go to that New Seasons? There's some negative vibes there. There's a cashier, can you see her aura? She has such a heavy aura. Protect my energy field. When I was younger, I used to do the meditation retreat, and I would just go under my covers. And just listen to Alice Coltrane under my covers in the monastery, because I just wanted to hide from everybody but Alice. And just... Not withholding spiritual aid. I want to talk a little bit about that aspect of it. Now, in the old days, first in Buddhism, precepts were given to ordained people. And the idea of the ordained people was a symbiotic relationship with lay people. It was basically this: we will give you food, medicine, and shelter to the degree you need it, and you will teach us. It was like your job to show up and teach. If you wanted to eat, you had to show up and teach. Or be available for it. You had to be available. So for an ordained person, if they're ready, teaching is an obligation. You sign up for that. But if we don't have that role, it's important to know that withholding spiritual aid doesn't mean you should preach. Right? Preaching this is not a proselytizing tradition. Right? In Japan, actually, you go around, I did this, and you chant the Heart Sutra. You just chant the Heart Sutra. You just go through all of the villages, all of the cities, and you're giving the teaching away, and some people will come out of their house and give you rice or money. Sometimes they'll do that. But you're doing it without any expectation. We don't preach. We don't preach because we're aware that the stance of preaching tends to give rise to dualism. I'm right and you people are wrong. I have the truth and you don't. Let me tell you the truth. How many times have you kind of closed your blinds when someone came to your house to deliver the truth? Teaching meditation might sometimes be the point. Sharing Buddhist teachings might sometimes be the point. You have to listen for when it's really what's being asked for. I think there are people right now who are losing their ability to hold not knowing about the way the world is going to unfold. Practitioners included. Right now, not knowing is in short supply. Can we embody that? Can we hold that position? Can we hang in there when there are people who are certain, who are afraid and certain and want to draw us into their view? Not to oppose their view, but if it's our actuality to say, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Right now, not giving in to us versus them is in short supply. Even shorter is a confidence in a larger truth than the power struggles of human beings. Is that all there is? Is that it? Is human beings fighting over resources, whether it's the resources of ideas, the resources of power and wealth, territory? Is that all that's going on in this world? I suppose it's a matter of how big your focus is. You could only see that. It's very sad. It's very easy to only see that, to only think that the universe is people basically in power struggles. Some have, some not. And of course, those that feel they don't have, want. And of course, those who feel they have want to keep those who want it to themselves. Is that the whole universe? People who can see that there's more going on than that are in short supply. Who can speak to there being more than that. Right now, calmness is in short supply. Just basically not freaking out. All of this is part of spiritual aid. In a sense, it's an invitation to just really embody what we know from our training. That challenge, that's a challenge. I have that challenge. We all have that challenge if we take this to heart, this practice. I have some real, genuine insights. I have some things I know, not with my noggin only, some things I know, and my ability to live them, those haven't yet synced up. But that's spiritual aid, when those actually come together. So in a sense, not withholding spiritual aid is about doing our own practice, really doing it consistently, not forgetting that this is endless refinement, no arrival. This little brown bib doesn't mean I arrived somewhere. It just means a brown bib. I'm going to close. I'm writing this is in progress, but I like to share these things because sometimes I get feedback. This is called Practitioner's Spell for Transmuting FOMO. And if you're an older person, FOMO, and you've not heard about FOMO, it's fear of missing out. All right. Practitioner's Spell for Transmuting FOMO. This is a fullness, permeated by aliveness, vast without edges, never devoid of beauty, mystery shown in 10 billion forms. Last time I wanted something, I got what I wanted. Want booted up again. Oh, the same illusory dance. Last time I wanted something, it wasn't quite what I wanted. Want booted up again, drawing me into the same illusory dance. This is a fullness, a sky above, ground below, beings of all sorts somehow wandering around. This is a fullness, never a single moment I can't taste the taste of being. Never a single moment I can't stretch a bit more this stretch-loving heart. Last time I wanted something, I heard a teacher say, it doesn't get any better than this. Last time I wanted, it was fine, but with strings attached, not like Dharmakaya's kiss. This is a fullness, abundant mana silence flowing on and on without ending. This is a fullness. Happening always happens, basic wonder dancing, it's simply fantastic. This is a fullness. But what is this?
Thank you for listening to the Zen Community of Oregon podcast, and thank you for your practice. New episodes air every week. Please consider making a donation at zendust.org. Your support supports us.